You know, the last few games I've covered on this channel have been overwhelmingly positive, and for someone as cynical as I am, that is quite the achievement indeed. Thankfully, Arcane Studios stepped up to help balance the scales with their latest release, Redfall. Redfall is a co-op multiplayer FPS game which sees you tasked with the goal of taking down a group of vampires that have covertly taken up residence in the local neighbourhood. But none of that's important. No, the thing you need to understand is that Redfall is a buggy, uninteresting take on an already well-worn formula. The enemies are painfully dumb, the gameplay loop is tediously unfulfilling, and the frame rate is locked to 30 FPS despite Microsoft's prior claims. But hey, it's on Games Pass, so that almost makes it feel like it's free. Originally, this video was going to be a full-fledged review of Redfall, but after putting a few hours into it, I realised I didn't have the willpower to delve any deeper. Instead, I found the fallout surrounding its release to be a far more interesting talking point. Phil Spencer, an all-round nice guy and probably the saviour of the Xbox brand, recently appeared on Kinda Funny's podcast where he talked candidly about Redfall's failure and the larger initiative for Xbox as a brand. The whole podcast is pure gold, and it was refreshing to hear someone with such a high-profile role speak so apologetically without shying away from answering the more difficult questions. That being said, I can't quite agree with everything that Phil Spencer put across to us, with the main point of contention lying with his views on exclusive titles.
There is no world where Starfield's an 11 out of 10 and people start selling their PS5s. That's not going to happen. And I see it out there. I see commentary that if you just build great games, everything would turn around. It's just not true that if we go off and build great games, all of a sudden you're going to see console share shift in some dramatic way. And the console is the core of the Xbox brand. There's no doubt. So like we will stay focused on making sure that console experience is awesome. But I know some people want to hold us up of just being a better green version of what the blue guys do. And I'm just going to say, like, there's not a win for Xbox in staying in the wake of somebody else.
Though I understand his sentiments that it's unlikely a single game will put Xbox above PlayStation, and I agree that Xbox needs to find its own unique selling point, I still find Phil's comments to be rather dismissive of the impact that exclusives can have. There's a well-documented history of great games boosting console sales, from the likes of Tetris and Pokemon on the Game Boy, all the way through to the current generation with a third of the PlayStation 5 player base owning a copy of God of War Ragnarok. Even the train wreck that we call the Wii U managed to see some increase in sales with the release of Mario Kart 8, where the game found itself at home on nearly 50% of all consoles, alongside a 600% hardware sales increase in the UK. Of course, the Wii U was 9 years ago, and we live in an age thirsty for higher frame rates, 4K resolution, and eye-wateringly quick load times, yet the Nintendo Switch still manages to remain one of the best-selling consoles to date. That's certainly not due to its lackluster power, nor is it down to its abysmal online features and anti-consumer subscription services. It's because they make great games that you can only play on their console. And with Tears of the Kingdom selling over 10 million copies in its first 3 days, the numbers speak for themselves. And it's not like the Xbox brand hasn't seen its own fair share of success thanks to its exclusives. Halo Combat Evolved pretty much put the original Xbox on the map, while Halo 2 took it to the next level, earning $125 million in its first day, the biggest first day earnings of any entertainment release of the time. That wasn't quite enough for the juggernaut that was Bungie's Halo, as the release of the third installment shattered that record, earning $170 million within the first 24 hours of launch. And yes, that too was another record. These numbers were big in their own right, but considering these games weren't multi-platform, along with the relative infancy of the Xbox brand, this was beyond impressive. Yes, there are many more factors at play here, but if nothing else, these examples show that having great games on your console is nothing but a good thing. Particularly if those great games are exclusive to your console, or in the case of present-day Xbox, your Microsoft-based platform of choice. And that's just the thing. Though console sales may not be the primary focus of Microsoft anymore, there's no denying that Games Pass is. What a fantastic concept. A subscription service that lets you play as many games as you want for as long as you want, with flexible payment options, reasonable pricing, and most importantly, day one releases for the latest Xbox games. Combine that with the rest of the Xbox arsenal, xCloud, PC support, smart delivery, and an incredible console in terms of power versus price, and you've got yourself a force to be reckoned with. But that niggling problem still remains. What does any of that matter if there's no substance to it? Where are the killer apps, the God of War or Zelda equivalent that's going to remind me why I invested in the Xbox ecosystem? It's like buying a luxury yacht then keeping it on your driveway. Sure, it looks good, might even wind up the neighbours a bit, but it's not really doing anything noteworthy without the ocean waves complementing it. Sure, Xbox are keeping their promise when they release the likes of Redfall day one, but when the quality isn't there, what's the point? Thing is, Redfall isn't an isolated case by any means, and I'd argue that the Xbox quality issues have plagued the brand since the release of the Xbox One. Fable Legends became so far removed from what was expected of the series that the game ultimately never saw the light of day, and did little more than put the franchise to bed. Sure, there's a new game in the works, we got a 30-second trailer that showed us that much, but 3 years on, and we haven't heard a thing since. The Master Chief Collection released in a worse state than Redfall, with a broken UI, unplayable multiplayer, and a host of bugs and crashes not present in the originals. I still have my Wanth emblem to show the scars from that launch, and I'd argue that the game only really hits its mark with the release of the Halo Reach expansion over 5 years later. Halo 5 didn't fare much better either, and released without major franchise staple content such as Infection Mode, which was later drip-fed back to us. I'm sure 343 will learn from that mistake. All the while, microtransactions haunted every aspect of the game, from pay-to-win mechanics to the incessant grinding for a chance of finding that one piece of armor you actually want. And this isn't just the case of one developer being incompetent. Gears 4 was a largely mediocre experience that was also plagued with microtransactions, where fan-favourite characters were locked behind a roll of the dice paywall, while the poor implementation of the Season Pass left fans out of pocket and bewildered to its actual purpose. Gears 5 took it to new heights, releasing as a broken mess of a game, all the while the aggressive nature of the microtransaction business model collapsed under its own weight, causing the developers to U-turn on it entirely. The entire fiasco left the Gears of War brand pretty much dead, and, call me crazy here, I don't think the recently released card game is going to be enough to fix that. Despite all that, Halo Infinite somehow managed to eclipse the lot of them, promising the world and releasing as little more than a proof of concept, the sort of thing you'd cobble together in a drunken frenzy the night before your uni assignment deadline was due. The game didn't even launch with a damn leveling system, but that's okay. Brothers and sisters, you still have time to convert, learn the error of your ways and join the Doom 2016 multiplayer master race. Salvation awaits. The issue here is that these games felt fresh and innovative back on the 360. They managed to showcase gameplay mechanics that would later become industry staples in design, while working side by side with the 360's unique selling point by bringing online multiplayer to the console market in a way its competitors couldn't match. This meant that Xbox had already found its own identity through its core games, but over the years the momentum for these franchises petered out due to a lack of innovation and unpolished or downright broken launches. Though games like the Master Chief Collection and Sea of Thieves have come on leaps and bounds, the damage was done the moment they released in the state that they did. After all, you only get one chance to make a good first impression. Yet this pay now, fix later mentality seems to keep cropping up in the Xbox camp, and along with Phil Spencer's comments that imply a 7 out of 10 game is considered to be a success, it feels more like the games themselves are just a means to an end, something to pass the time along a bit, or at the very least, something they can rush out the door to pad out the Games Pass library. Of course, there have been success stories over the years. Ori, Sunset Overdrive and Grounded spring to mind, but those titles aren't synonymous with Xbox, and alone they aren't enough to pull people in. Despite being good games, they're what Luigi's Mansion is to the mainline Mario games, or what Detroit is to Uncharted. They are the appetizers between the main courses. And that's the core problem with the current Xbox strategy. There really isn't all that much to entice someone over from their competitor. I'm not talking about having them completely abandon their platform and join Team Xbox the way Phil describes it. Despite lines being drawn in the sand on whether you're a blue guy or a green guy, nothing is stopping you from owning every console on the market. And though Xbox tends to be my go-to for third-party purchases, I have a PS5 and Switch ready to go when an exclusive launches on one of their platforms. That certainly wouldn't be the case if the roles were reversed. And hey, even if Xbox doesn't want to coerce new customers over to their side, what about trying to retain the customers you already have? With how well the PS4 and PS5 have sold compared to the Xbox line, it's safe to say at least a few people have jumped ship over the last decade. What I find most baffling about this approach is it seems to contradict the very idea they spent years building up. Giving customers multiple ways to enjoy Xbox as a brand instead of just a console means that players don't have to sell their PS5s. Whether they choose to stream on the go, keep it simple with a Series S, or go all in on a fancy gaming PC, they get to choose their entry point, and Microsoft makes profit each and every time. But as Phil explains, most of the people are already a member of one of the three ecosystems, and their digital library is already there. This is the first generation where the big games that they're playing were available last gen as well. So with that in mind, what exactly is supposed to bring people over to Xbox? The exclusives most likely aren't going to do it. Brand loyalty means that consumers will stick to what they know, and with Sony having a crack at building up its own version of Games Pass, Microsoft may just lose its ace in the hole. Despite dragging their feet, Microsoft seem well aware that they are lagging behind with their games as they continue to assimilate studios from all walks of the industry. As it stands, Xbox Game Studios is made up of 23 developers, with Bethesda being its most notable inclusion, costing over $7 billion to acquire. That's certainly no small fee, but it pales in comparison to their current attempts to buy Activision Blizzard for a colossal $68 billion. Unsurprisingly, the biggest deal of its kind in the gaming industry. So with that sort of firepower, you think we'd have a plethora of games to play? No, of course we don't. In truth, I wanted to be more critical of this. All that money, all that talent, and very little to show for it. But the bottom line is that these deals take time. It's a slow process trying to incorporate your strategy onto a team that may have done things in a very different way. These developers are still businesses at the end of the day, they still have prior commitments to uphold. Phil Spencer has stated that he won't push against the aspirations of his teams if they want to create a certain type of game, and I admire that. It makes sense to let creative people do creative things while letting the passion shine through in the end product. Though when you have failures like Redfall, Gears 5 and Halo Infinite, there's clearly something going wrong, and since these are all made by different teams, the finger naturally points back to Xbox. Is it down to Phil Spencer's hands-off management style? Maybe Xbox aren't communicating their criteria well enough with their teams throughout the development cycle. Or maybe they can simply afford to have setback after setback when Games Pass continues to churn out a profit. Regardless of the reason, it's clearly not a great time to be on Team Xbox. Even if Microsoft don't value console sales anymore, they should absolutely value exclusives. They have positioned themselves well in the market, giving people a range of ways to buy into their brand. Now they just need to remember why people buy games consoles and gaming PCs in the first place. With 23 studios flying the Xbox banner and the showcase only hours away from when this video goes live, I hope Xbox makes everything I've said here today completely irrelevant. Though there may not be a world where Starfield releases as an 11 out of 10 and people start selling their PS5s, there evidently is a world that's hungry for great games. Thanks for watching, if indeed you still are. Ta-ra!